My name is Percy Jackson.
But okay, we're gonna switch over to talking about the Lost Hero now. Um,
Yeah.
we read the first 2 chapters of the book. It's right here. Isn't it pretty? Look at them. That's a
Yeah.
spoiler, but just like you don't
I
know.
have
You just
this one.
you don't know what
Yeah.
that. It's the same. It's a dragon.
Yeah.
I like this character, the dragon. He's nice. Except from what I remember later on. But I don't know where to start. Um, from this because it's such a I've read these books before. Mandy's never read them before. And so I read them before, but like don't remember everything because I never do. Um, because of dissociation. And so some of this stuff I'm like remembering it again for like the first time. I don't think it's possible, like physically possible to be on the internet and not know that this book starts with Jason. That was a surprise back in the day, but that couldn't be a surprise anymore. I will I will admit that the Heroes of Olympus books, I miss the old titles. That sound like clickbait thumbnails for YouTube videos. And all the other
Yeah.
in the first 5 books, I do miss them. I was glad when they came back in the recent books with Percy being the narrator again, but they aren't in any of these books at all. Every Heroes
Yeah.
of Olympus book, the title is just whatever character the perspective is from.
Really feel you on that one. I miss the snippy titles.
Yeah. And so there's so much from just the first couple chapters that I feel like is just going to keep going throughout at least this book and the next one really of who knows if it keeps going after that. But at least these first two where you can compare what happened in this one to the lightning thief in a very to me in a very obvious way. Where he's making like he's showing the difference, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
because this book starts off with Jason, and Jason wakes up on a school bus, and he has no memory of anything at all. Um, he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know his own name. He doesn't know anyone else's name. And Leo and Piper are talking to him as if he's supposed to know who they are. And he has no idea like where he's going, what he's doing, like nothing.
I mean, one of the things that I kind of liked right off the bat was not just did he wake up like, in this situation where everybody knows him, but he's like holding Piper's hand and he keeps thinking, she's really pretty. I feel like I should know that this is my girlfriend if this is my girlfriend because she's really pretty.
Hmm. And there is there is an explanation to why he
Yeah.
doesn't remember anything at all. And why him and Piper are dating and anyway, even before we go into any of that stuff, it's just I thought it was very interesting to show how it's very similar to the beginning of The Lightning Thief, but it's also not at all at the same time. One obvious difference right away is that there's actual like diversity with
Yes.
the main trio. Like Jason is like the default white character, but I don't think he will be if we ever see him on like anything on the TV show anyway. Um, but that would be shocking. That would be so weird if anyway. But in the books he is, and then Piper is indigenous, and they don't make that clear in the first chapter, but they do in chapter 2, I'm pretty sure. And Leo is Latino. And so from the start, it's just more diversity in the books just from the very beginning of just like the introduction. And the satyr is Coach Hedge, who is like the person. He's like Grover, but not, and also Chiron at the same
Yes.
time. but in this version, he has a baseball bat, and Hedge is a very like aggressively minded person overall. Throughout all the books, it's like makes me laugh because it's funny. It's nothing like serious, but he is that person that always has his baseball bat and wants to fight someone, but is also terrified to do it once it actually happens, like satyrs would be. Um, but right away from the beginning, I just thought it was very interesting how in this version, Jason wakes up and has no memory of anything at all, and everyone else is telling him, like, oh, I know who you are. Like, what do you mean that you don't know who you are? I know who you are. We're like best friends. How could you not know where we are and what we're doing and where we're going? And in this version, instead of going to they're going to a museum again, like in The Lightning Thief, but this time they're not going to like the Met in New York City because they're not there. These kids are in Arizona and they're going to the Grand Canyon instead and going to like a museum at the Grand Canyon. And their
Mhm,
school is somewhat similar in the way that the Yancey Academy is not like the nicest school
mhm,
to Percy or anything like that. And the biggest thing I guess that I remembered is that the school is a wilderness school, which is
mhm,
a troubled teen camp school. And he doesn't remember like anything about it. He wouldn't. This will make sense later why he doesn't remember anything about it. But it gives Rick Riordan an example to describe what he thinks a troubled teen
mhm.
camp wilderness camp sounds like. And I did a video about this on TikTok that took off, and people from Utah are in the comments talking about wilderness schools. But um, I I'm gonna try to post some of their comments without showing their names because there are people that went to those schools, many of them in there talking about it. But the thing I wanted to just mention about him bringing that up at all is that this book came out in 2010.
Mhm.
Paris Hilton didn't come forward about her abuse until like 2019, 2020.
Yeah, it was
And
very recent.
one of the things I like to remind people that I feel like this is true for most people that have been through some sort of severe trauma, especially as a child, is we're like overly protective of other people that have been through things that we haven't. Um, and so I feel very protective of people that went to these camps and went through this stuff, even though I never ended up going to one, but I can
Mhm,
imagine what it would be like. And so, one of the things I try to remind people is just that victims of places like this and just overall, we're always talking about what happened. It's
mhm.
just that most of the time people aren't really listening. Like,
Yeah.
I think that Dr. Phil was still on TV back then
Yeah, I
doing
was just about to say that because, like, before the more public awareness of wilderness camps, that was the only thing I knew about them was that shows like Maury and Dr. Phil and stuff would randomly have episodes where, like, oh, let's put this out of control teen on TV and let them make themselves look ridiculous. And then we're going to send them to some camp that's going to beat them into submission, essentially. And it was always framed as this like, this is what they need. This is the only thing that's going to help them because they're so far gone and like we're going to save them this way. Which like a big public awareness of, this has always been bad, then was able to be like brought out from that in Bad Baby, who like the first thing she was known for was I can't remember if it was Maury or Dr. Phil. I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Phil,
Dr. Phil.
where she was one of those out of control teens. And like the catchphrase she kept saying was "Catch me outside," and so that became a thing where people were memeing her stuff. But from that, she got sent to a wilderness camp. And it wasn't until she was an adult and then had a career actually doing some actually somewhat okay music that she was able to then speak out about like this experience was actually awful and here's what happened to me during it.
Yeah, her and Paris Hilton came out at right around the same time. Like, I'm pretty sure she said something after Paris did, because once you have somebody in that high visibility talking about
Yeah.
how they were abused in every possible way in Utah at all these camps, people are going to start saying stuff. Um, but um, we read a Rick Riordan book that isn't Percy Jackson last year called Cold Spring, which is a book he wrote about involving a camp like this. And
Mhm.
so you don't have to read that book, but just know that he hates them. The main character of that book that thinks that the camps are like he works for one and is one of the people that kidnaps children. He's very explicit in that book about how awful the abuse they put these kids through is. You see one of the kids like literally like breaking down throughout the course of the book and becoming numb because of what they put her through. And the main character guy who thinks that the camps are really great
Mhm.
literally murdered somebody. He murdered someone. He murdered a child and got away with it and has no remorse about the fact that he murdered a kid and got away with it and messed up literally everyone else's life that he's ever met because he wanted to get away with murdering somebody, a child, a teenager. And so he very obviously hates these, but it was still nice to hear him. Like, I just wanted to read like how Leo, the character of Leo, Leo is definitely the kind of character similar to Percy, where
Mhm.
he is kind of saying the things that like you could imagine Percy doing, that's kind of like telling you what Rick Riordan thinks about certain things in the way
Yeah.
like Percy does too. But he says in it, like, he's explaining to Jason, like, we go to the wilderness, and he says, Leo made air quotes, wilderness school. And before he even starts this, my favorite thing that Leo says is like, oh yeah, didn't you hear that the kids are actually the problem? And I was like, I love Rick Riordan so much.
Yeah, it's wilderness
But
school kids for the animals.
yeah, and he says, we go to the wilderness school, which means we're bad kids. Your family or the court or whoever decided you were too much trouble, so they shipped you off to this lovely prison. Sorry, a boarding school in Armpit, Nevada, where you learn valuable nature skills like running 10 miles a day through the desert, through the cacti, and weaving daisies into hats. And for a special treat, we go on educational field trips with Coach Hedge, who keeps order with a baseball bat. And that's not even an exaggeration, like, of what
No.
those places are actually like. Like, when Bad Baby came forward, she told a story about how one of the counselors, because they don't have to have mental health degrees to work there, so they're not real counselors, um, died because they were attacked by one of the like teenagers that was at the school, and she didn't. They just were told that the counselor died. She didn't find out anything about what actually happened until like she left. So that's just
Wow.
kind of, yeah. It's just people who have money, they have access to children who have no rights. They could do anything. That's why they're scary. But either way, these kids being at this shows, especially when they mention the reasons why they ended up going, there is absolutely no reason. Like, there's zero
No.
reason why a kid would ever end up at a camp like this. They should never even be there. The juvenile hall places shouldn't exist either. Though that makes me like not even irrationally, it's rational to be like really angry about those. The fact that there's juvenile detention centers makes me want to die. That those places even exist, that people's jobs are to show up to work every day and keep track of literal children that they put behind bars. that developmentally do not understand what they did was wrong enough to be punished in a way that doesn't work with adults, but you're doing it to literal children. Um, I don't know. I always empathized more growing up with the kids that were like that. Like I remember watching Maury started doing like the Maury Povich show, started doing stuff
Hmm.
about wilderness camps when I was in like middle school, I think. And I remember just watching it and being like, is this what people think I'm like? Or is this like what I should be doing? Because that's like um how I was discussed by some people of being like that. And so I always feel like I'm like people like that. And so I get really mad when I think about kids like that still being sent to places like that. Um, but either way, like the characters in this story, Leo is, I know this, he hasn't said this yet, but Leo's a foster kid, and
Yeah,
he
well, what
mentioned,
he says sarcastically because he says, because Jason says this is some kind of mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. And Leo goes, yeah, right, Jason, we've all been framed. I didn't run away 6 times. Piper didn't steal a BMW.
hmm and when for Leo, like, yeah, a lot of foster kids run away from home.
Mhm.
Home. It's not
Yeah.
actual home, but Um, if you want to really depress yourself, look into that. If you've if you've never followed former foster youth, they're also on TikTok. I also follow those people. Um,
Yeah.
and so you should look them up if you haven't talked to them already or watched what they had to say already. But you learn more about uh uh Leo's story later on to explain like why he was doing that. But like kids who are just regular demigods run away from home. And so somehow him running away multiple times led to them sending him to a troubled teen camp, which does
Hmm.
happen sometimes with kids like this. They just like stick them somewhere to get rid of them instead of maybe asking them why they keep running away from home, because
Yeah.
people actually talk to children when it's actually helpful and only talk to them when it's really, really unhelpful. Um, and then
Yeah. And
the
Piper Piper's thing is connected to who her demigod parent is, as far as I know, because unfortunately you can't be in this fandom and not know, like some of these characters already. But I will say the two like hints we've gotten in this chapter so far that we haven't mentioned yet on who her demigod parent is her eyes seem to change color like a kaleidoscope, brown, blue, green. And then with the BMW thing, Leo says, "What was your story? You talked the dealer into lending it to you." Um, which like that makes no sense as to why she'd be there. If she talked a guy into lending it to her, wouldn't that be his fault? Like, wouldn't he be the one liable?
Do you think he remembered that? Like,
Oh, that's
if
good.
you're if if you're doing like a Jedi mind trick basically on someone, they would just remember that you stole the car from them, basically. That's basically what that is, because they didn't actually like choose to give it to you.
Hmm.
I will say just for like historical fact, for Percy Jackson stuff that uh Piper and who her godly parent was a big surprise for everyone reading these books. Like the first time you read it, you had no idea who her parent is, which is why they kind of take a little bit longer when we do get to camp in the
Hmm.
next chapters to tell you. Um, and the reason for that, of course, is that she is the first. We've never seen charm speak before. No one had any idea what that was at all. This is the book that invented that. There's no charm speak in the original 5 books at all. The only reason why you know what it is because they brought it up in the TV show. Otherwise, we had no idea what that meant. We knew that it was obviously meant something, but we had no idea what that could possibly mean. And that's just one of those things that's different now. Now it seems really obvious who her godly parent is because this book is what introduced that sort of story to everybody. But at the time, it was very like confusing about who I remember when I read this, I had no idea who you had an idea of who the other two parents were, but I had no idea who hers could be. And I'm not somebody that like thinks too much about that. Like when I'm reading a book, um, and I really like it, um, I'm not somebody who reads stuff for like the plot in that way. Like I know some people need like a good plot to get into a book. I care about the
Mhm.
characters. And so just overall, when I read these books for the first time, I don't think too hard about that stuff. Even when they were introducing Percy, I didn't think at all about who his parent was because I was like, he's gonna tell me eventually, and I'll see who it is when it is. But I just don't think about it that much. I know some people
Yeah.
do, and they like it was one of those things they couldn't figure it out back then. Um, it's very different now, but back then that was the first time we saw people doing. She's the first one that we ever saw doing this sort of thing. Um, um, okay,
Let's
what
see.
happens next?
So we get a hint at who Leo's godly parent is kind of next because he's messing with Coach Hedge and he has somehow tampered with a megaphone and like it's it's kind of indicated that he's very much a tinkerer because he's always just hands like the worksheet that they're working on. He says he already used it for spitballs. He did this prank with the megaphone. Something comes up later where he like builds a little helicopter with like pipe cleaners.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm thinking of it. I'm reverse engineering it because I'm like, these are all the hints that Rick put in here of it. But Coach Hedge starts using the megaphone, and at first his voice comes out like Darth Vader, but then it starts saying things like almost the old school kids' toys where you pull it and then it goes, the cow says, moo.
But the one thing from this part is that Jason's talking about how the coach is like staring at him and
Hmm.
it just keeps looking at him like he's mad at him or something and he doesn't understand why at first, which is it's okay, sweetheart.
Yeah.
You don't have a
Yeah.
reason to.
Yeah. So that happens over the course of this chapter, as you said. Leo goes from like joking about, oh haha, you don't remember, like thinking that it's him playing it up, and then it slowly is they realize it's serious. Piper realizes first. Piper's the one like, wait a second, I think he really doesn't remember us. And like, what should we do? Do we need to tell? Does he have a concussion? What's going on? And Leo's just kind of like joking through it until he finally realizes as well. And then he says, like, what are we going to tell Coach Hedge? She's going to smack him with a baseball bat? No, like, of course we're not. And then this like kid Dylan kind of comes into play where Dylan is, they say he looks like he has a Superman style haircut, deep tan, and teeth so white they should come with a warning label that says, do not stare directly at teeth, permanent blindness. So he's kind of automatically coming in like flirting with Piper. He gets paired up with Piper as these kids are going on through this field trip and have to work on their worksheets together. And there's something about him that just like it's making you uncomfortable because Piper's uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. And the one thing with his character that goes on for the rest of these two chapters is I wanted to mention that the stuff that makes him uncomfortable is the fact that she clearly doesn't want him around her and doesn't want him to touch her, and he keeps doing it anyway. Just a reminder that when people tell you no, you back off.
Yes.
Like the number one rule of consent, that's what that means. And so when a girl or guy or non-binary person tells you that they don't want that, you have to back off. That's the rules if you want to not be a jerk. But I appreciated the fact that the one being like the cute, popular, good-looking teenage boy, but is also doing that kind of stuff because he can get away with it is the villain. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I also really appreciated. So right after this is where it comes up that Piper is indigenous, but I do like that it like you see the microaggressions at her. I mean, maybe not even microaggressions, just like straight up aggression,
Yeah,
and
those are pretty macro.
yeah, uh, so Rick handles them in a way where it's not like, hey, look, here's racism and racism is bad. It's very subtle in that, like, so they make a joke about rain dances at one point, and Piper's like, I'm not even that type of native. Like, you're talking about Cherokee. That's not me. I am Hualapai. I'm not sure how to say what tribe she's from.
It's the other way
Um,
around. She's a Cherokee, and but the
oh,
tribe that they're like that made the museum that they're going to visit is the Huapa Hualapai.
yeah.
I looked them up because I remember them. Every once in a while, if you're on TikTok, this sort of thing will come up where people will be like at the Grand Canyon, and they'll be like, "Oh, I didn't know that there's people who live here." And that's this tribe.
Mhm,
They live in the Grand Canyon, the area that these kids are actually at, like their museum with like the bridge and stuff is their land. They have a website. I'll like link it and stuff if you want, if you're curious like me, but you have to follow the rules of their tribe when you're there visiting, and like not leaving any garbage, not doing certain things like that some people don't listen to that are stupid. Um, but either way, that's who they are. They've been there since forever. Um, and they're a tribe that's just always been able to stay there. It says that the reservation was established in 1883. Who the hell knows what that means? That basically means that the state of Arizona decided to establish them, but I say who knows what that means because they've been there for thousands of years. So what do you mean that it was established by white people? Well, shut up. Um, but it says like they have 1,600 people that live there. 1,300 of them are tribal members. They work at the museum and like the bridge area of the Grand Canyon. You can get like a tour kind of thing from them. And so if you ever see people like posting every couple months, somebody posts a video like that. Especially for whatever reason, British people love going to the Grand Canyon and then getting confused about the people that live there. Maybe because I've honestly never heard of there being indigenous people to the United Kingdom, besides like Ireland, Irish, and Scottish people, but I mean actual England. So I'm not even sure that most of them have ever even seen like indigenous, at least Native Americans especially, but just indigenous people in general, um,
yeah.
for bad reasons. But but you'll see that, and so that's what that is. But I
Yeah.
think
The
that
second, wait, the second macroaggression thing that they say is they make a joke about Piper's dad potentially being too drunk to work, and that's why she turned into a klepto, let's say. So yeah, what again, I appreciate that Rick Riordan is like putting it in here, but not doing oh look, racism bad, like in a way where it's like it feels preachy, you know. It's very it almost is natural to how you can see kids doing this to each other, unfortunately.
yeah, and to compare to like the Lightning Thief, Percy is getting bullied by people at Yancey Academy in the same sort of way. It's just that this time, because it's not a white kid, it's said, different things are said, but it's the basic thing. It's like they just never fit in and always have problems. That was interesting. And I wanted to bring up the Cold Spring book that we read again because it was interesting reading this book and like remembering what people generally say about Rick Riordan, like how he wrote Heroes of Olympus and stuff, is because the first five books have like almost no diversity. Like Beckendorf and Chris Rodriguez are the only ones that are. like I think are the only ones that are
I think so.
not white. Um, and so a lot of people just, and I understand why people assume this, they would think that, he was being like a normal white author of the time, and white is still the default, but especially was then. And so I think a lot of people assumed that he got feedback after he wrote the first 5 books and then decided to make these ones more diverse. But we read Cold Spring, and that book came out in 2003, which was 2 years before Percy Jackson, and that book is very diverse. Um,
Yes.
there's a lot of there's there's a couple like Mexican characters. One of the main characters that's a really great character, honest, like the only adult that's not a horrible person, is Mexican. There is a black character that is every adult is racist to him just because he's black. Um, there's a couple characters like that in those books, and the book isn't like perfect when it comes to that stuff. It's not, but there's a lot of really diverse people in that book that reminded me rereading this of
Yeah.
how the characters are in this book. And so I honestly think that he just took all that stuff away for the first 5 Percy Jackson books so that he could have a better chance of getting published, because that was the first books he was doing in the like children's literature world. The Cold
Mhm.
Spring book and the other mystery books he did were adult. Um, and so I think he took those away so that he would get a publishing deal and have the best chance to publish the first 5. People tend to forget that he didn't even quit being a teacher until he was writing Battle of the Labyrinth, which is
Yeah.
why that book is his favorite one to write, because it was the first one that he could just write it and didn't have to work another job. And teaching is a intensive job, so it's not like an easy job to be doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think sometimes people forget that he didn't even know if they were going to let him do his whole story. And so then once he became like this you know, national like bookseller, was on like the New York Times bestseller list and stuff, he was like, "Oh, now I can go back to how I usually write these books."
Mhm.
But if you didn't read that book or didn't know that, you wouldn't know that about him.
Yeah.
And how he wrote his ones before. But
So they get outside, and what that I took note of was that as they're moving around the Grand Canyon, there is basically a clear sky everywhere except for over them. Like it says, as far as Jason could see in any direction, red and gray ravines cut through the desert like some crazy god had taken. Oh wait, sorry. That's not the part. That's the part I underlined. That's what I was thinking. Banks of storm clouds had moved overhead while they'd been inside, casting shadows like angry faces across the cliffs. And it's basically over just that area, if I remember correctly. I
mhm.
think. Um, but yeah, Jason also he has this thought. That's why I underlined that part about any direction he could see. It looks like ravines cut through the desert like some crazy god had taken a knife to it. And he gets this pain behind his eyes when he thinks that. And he's like, crazy gods, why did I even think that? And he starts like kind of going into this meta, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? What's going on here? Um, let's see. They're going out onto like a walkway that seems unstable, but like Coach had just telling them it can definitely hold all of your guys' weight, it can hold more than your guys' weight. But there's this storm going around them at this part. So Leo and Jason are definitely kind of getting scared. Piper's over off with Dylan still. Let's see.
Did Coach Hedge talk to Jason already about how he knows?
Not quite yet. Let's see. Jason notices he has a coin in his pocket, and the coin, it's giving Roman right away. It has an inscription that says Julius on it, and it's gold. And he doesn't know why he has it, but he has a feeling it's going to be important. let's see. Then we get to the part Leo makes a little helicopter out of pipe cleaners that gets halfway across the Grand Canyon, which is pipe cleaners, no other things. Let's see. Um, but then, okay, so here's where we kind of get a hint of what's going on because Jason decides to ask Leo, like, how did we meet though? When did we meet? And Leo starts thinking about it. He's like, why don't you remember? Wait a second. How did we meet? And he can't quite place his finger on it. And let's see. You think you're right and everybody else is wrong, Leo asked. Do you think you just appeared here this morning and we all got fake memories of you? And Jason thinks to himself, that's exactly what I'm thinking, but if I said that, I'd look crazy.
Yeah. And this is some of the comparison to the lightning thief that I liked because it's like backwards to how Percy was gaslit, that Percy
Yes.
saw what happened, but everyone around him was telling him that he didn't see what he actually saw. Who is Mrs. Dodds? We never had a teacher with that name, and all of that stuff. Like, so instead, in this version, he's the one that is still saying, like, I know this is wrong, but what he knows is wrong is that everyone remembers him. And so instead, with
Mhm.
him, it's like a lack of something that I don't know any of these people, and these people don't actually know me, but they're pretending like they do. Um,
Mhm.
it's like that sort of an idea, and that like whole idea is very. That's what makes everything that happens with those
Yeah.
three interesting because they. I just always thought that whole storyline of how they remember things, but they're not real. And at a certain
Mhm.
point, they become like aware of that, but they still like, it's one of those weird, it gives me like a headache to think about it in like a fun way. To think about like if you have memories inside your head of being friends with someone or dating someone, even if somebody tells
Mhm.
you that those memories aren't real, um, like, but you still remember them and you still have like an emotional
Yeah.
attachment to them because of those memories. So how do you like they go back and forth so much about so many things with that because they know that what they remember isn't real, but it feels like it is because they
Yeah.
feel these things for each other even and they can't just like turn it off when they're told that it's not real. A lot of them try to like double down later on to try to convince themselves that there is something real about them because this
Yeah.
is a gigantic invasion of everything to it not this whole thing overall is to like just shove Jason out of his place and shove him here and shove Percy out of his place and shove him where he is. But it's also just like a whole thing to like mess with their minds so much where both Percy and Jason don't remember anything when they first wake up. Although Jason's is a lot nicer, like way nicer
Yeah.
than how Percy wakes up. But
Literally
still,
holding a pretty rough hand. Like he couldn't wake up in better circumstances.
yeah, he woke up on a school bus next to people who thought that he was their best friend and had people to like help him when he first woke up. And you can tell which person that person is being nice to. And it's not Percy. But either way, it's just that whole idea of like putting fake memories into people's heads. Um, I this is like a thing that I'll bring up as we're reading these books, but to me, the reason why they did it like that is because they were getting back at Percy for making
Mhm.
them pay their child support. That's just how I see that, that he got like a win for the demigods, and so they don't give them any choice in this book at
Mhm.
all. Jason and Percy don't get a choice. All of their memories get ripped away from them. Other memories get implanted into Piper and Leo's heads that are fake. Um, it's just they messed with them so bad. Like one of the things that um people wonder about, like our my friend Ashley, she has said, like, I always had the idea that Leo and Piper were gonna like date or something before
Mhm.
the Jason and the memories and stuff happened. And I was like, that's
Oh.
really interesting. And that's like one of those things that people wonder about because the two of them were already friends. The two of them were
Mhm.
at this wilderness place together before he showed up, obviously. He showed up here because they're here. And so it makes you wonder, like, what was going on in their life before he was shoved into it and they were given all these fake memories? Like, what were they actually doing? Like, what was
Yeah.
their friendship and dynamic like? We will never know because they just erased it and put something else on top of it that made it disappear. But it's just
Yeah.
that's such a huge like I was just talking about consent, dear God. That's like literally like erasing somebody's like life, literal life, to replace it with something else
Mhm.
that works better for you. Jesus Christ. But either way, I thought that was really interesting how Jason is like knows like I don't know any of these people. They can't possibly know me. But they're
Yeah.
trying to at least surface level trying to get by with acting like they do for at least like right now. Um
Yeah.
and then I think this is when he goes and talks to Coach,
Yeah.
and I thought this was another like reverse thing from the Lightning Thief where the coach is the only one that is honest with him and is like, yeah, I don't have any idea who you are. And I've never
Mhm.
met you before. You weren't with us at this school before. And so he's looking at him like he doesn't like Jason because
Yeah.
he knows like something is about to happen.
Hedge was warned, like, oh, people are going to come get a package from you today. Like, people are going to come pick something up from you today. And so he's like, are you the package then? Like, what's going on? And of course, Jason still has no idea. He's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. Like,
Mhm. What are
poor
you
Jason.
talking about? And he starts saying like demigods and camp and all these words and he doesn't know what any of them mean, of course, because he doesn't remember anything.
Mhm.
And even if he did, he doesn't know like what about um camp, this camp. He doesn't know about this camp that it even exists. No, you is this is why I say that these books are fun because the person for like the point of view you're reading from is it feels like it feels like he's doing like a back and forth with the audience because the
Mhm.
audience knows what happened, but Jason doesn't know about anything at all. And so when you see things happening in like the sky and the wind start picking up and like Hedge starts saying telling him to go like get off the bridge and like go help people, you know that something's about to happen. You know,
Yeah.
especially Piper's with what's his face, that something is about to happen, but you don't know when. And like Jason is just like, who am I? Where am I? How am I in Arizona? Why am I at the Grand
Yeah.
Canyon? How did I get here? Who's my parents? Like he doesn't know anything. And so he's just like, I don't know what's going on. And you as the reader is like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, what? And you're just like wondering what's gonna happen and who's gonna show up and all that kind of stuff. Especially when you read this book back in 2010. I think I read it in like 2011, I'm pretty sure. Um yeah, because I read this one and Son of Neptune like back to back pretty much. And
Mhm.
when you read this one for the first time, you didn't know that Percy wasn't in it at all. And so I remember when they were talking about like a package being delivered, I thought everyone thought it was him.
Yeah.
Um, and thought it was going to be him showing up somehow because you're just like waiting for him to show up and then you're just like always waiting because it never happens.
Hedge orders everybody to get off the skywalk and come inside. Um, but let's see. Jason says, I thought this thing was stable. And Hedge said, under normal circumstances, yes, which these aren't. Come on. So that kind of is where the action starts for chapter 2. The storm picks up to the point where it turns into a miniature hurricane. And this is where me trying to find evidence of what's happening. I'm like, is this some sort of villain kind of shows that he's not a regular kid? Um, let's see, the door shuts behind with like Piper still outside and Dylan still outside after they usher most of the kids in. And Dylan's like not helping, and then he gets this grin on his face. And he flicks his wrist and basically throws Piper backwards, slamming her into the door. Jason and Leo then kind of get into the frame. So Coach Hedge tries to go after Dylan first, and he's just kind of like sucked away. It is revealed that he is a satyr at this point, but notably, Jason's like, it's a fawn. And and he's like, fawns are Roman, we call them satyrs, but we'll get onto that later. He sprouted black smoky wings and rose above the skywalk. If angels could be evil, Jason decided they would look exactly like this. And Jason instinctually says, "You're a fetishist," which like I know off of the top of my head that is Latin. I'm like, that's wind in Latin. And so I was again like, they're giving us hints at who he is here, like that he's in the wrong place kind of thing. Jason says this though, doesn't know what it means except for like a storm spirit. And Dylan starts laughing. Let's see. Dylan starts saying he waited for whatever reason. He knew Leo and Piper were demigods, could have killed them at any minute, but he's glad that he waited because clearly Jason's some sort of powerful demigod. Which, like, that's kind of our second time of someone telling Jason he's this big, powerful demigod and him having no idea of like why do they say this about like what is going on kind of thing.
Hmm. It reminds me of in The Lightning Thief when what's her name, the Fury, is trying to kill Percy and she's like, "Where is it? I know you took it. I know you took it. Where is it?" And he's like, "Where's what?" Like he had like no
Yeah.
idea what she's talking about. And
Jason loses a shoe. Like throughout lightning strikes and all of the wind and stuff. He ends up losing a shoe. A lightning bolt had gone straight through his body, blasted it off. His toes were black with sweat, is what it says. Let's see. And Coach Hedge throws his club at the Venti, but it goes right through them. This is the part where he gets carried off, I believe, into the sky. Which I thought he was gone. Dylan gets called back. The battle kind of ends because he doesn't necessarily like lose. He just goes back up into the sky. But he says, "My mistress will destroy all demigods. This is a war you cannot win."
the state of their world right now is that Dylan says that he was there for a couple months. It seems like, and he's like taunting Hedge and being like, "I was here all this time and you didn't realize that I was here," which like we know that that's not entirely true. But he mentions that
Mhm.
like Hedge is here as like a retirement from like seeking or however they put it, like being
Yeah.
actually out there. The other satyrs are. Um, a, a satyr like person would be a smart idea to be at a wilderness camp like this because demigod kids would definitely end up at them. But it's also
Mhm.
just the idea that there's overlap with that from when things were going on with Kronos and Luke. And so
Mhm.
it's like they were kind of like the a lot of people a lot of times there's like us as fans like speculating about why like Piper and Leo were able to um kind of like get by for out there on their own for a lot longer like age-wise than most demigods usually are. And the way I just kind of assumed that back then, and I still do now, for now at least, is that it's because the stuff with Luke was and Kronos was at like the really bad point, and so people just like they weren't paying attention, that sort of thing anymore. That once Luke took
Yeah.
like what taken over by Kronos, I don't think he was really like out there searching that much for new people anymore. They were just like getting ready for their final battle. And so I think that's why these kids are like 14, 15 and were able to still be alive because they were just like out there. But that's also just one of those things I thought of when he said that was like, yeah, people have been so focused on this other thing going on that they're just like not paying attention to people like this monster. Like when Kronos is trying to destroy the entire world, they're not going to spend too
Hmm.
much time on the wind and
Yeah.
who the villain person is until it, you know, happens.
The Greek name is just like they're just winds that torment people. There's nothing special to them. They're not necessarily corporeal in that sense. So it is partially Rick Riordan adding stuff to what they are, um, as he does, here and there, which is fine. But I just
Hmm.
wanted to give that background for my mythology loving people that they are a thing in mythology, but it's one of those natural forces just acting like natural forces type of things.
Hmm. And if you've somehow don't know who the villain is of these books, that is a clue.
Hmm.
That is something natural.
And this is where we find out he can fly. Like he can kind of
Hmm.
control wind, he can control their fall, and then he can also bring them back up as they're falling.
Hmm. It's like it's like how Percy in season one or book one, he uses his water powers when he's like freaking out, basically, to like save him and Annabeth, like in the TV show version, when they're going through the tunnel of love, but he can't like control it like that. He just like kind of does it when he's going on instinct. It's the same sort of thing, except it's flying. So it's much more
Yeah.
like dramatic looking that he's just like literally hanging there. And Piper's like, what?
Wait, he's like, well, I can let us down safely below, or I can try to go up. And so he just like thinks the word up and then it works. The three of them start discussing the demigod thing, like, and it's Leo makes the joke. I don't know what demi means, he said, but I'm not feeling too godly. You guys feeling godly? Um, so, like the three of them realize we're special somehow. We were targeted. We were what this guy was after, but we have no idea why. So now all of them are definitely in it together if they weren't before.
Yeah. And I do like this part where Leo is like, am I hallucinating? Like maybe I'm
Yeah.
just hallucinating. Maybe that's
Yeah.
it.
So at this point, they start to see a chariot coming in the distance, and they're like, "What the hell?" Because like chariots being carried by Pegasi and stuff. And like as it slowly comes into view, there's two teenagers in there, a tall blonde girl, maybe a little older than Jason, and a bulky dude with a shaved head and a face like a pile of bricks. They both wore jeans and orange t-shirts with shields tossed over their backs. The girl leaped off before the chariot had even finished moving. She pulled a knife and ran up towards Jason's group while the bulky dude was reining in the horses. Where is he? The girl demanded. Her gray eyes, a little fierce and were fierce and a little startling. Where's who? And then she just like realizes they don't know anything. She's like, "What about Gleason? Where's Gleason Hedge, the protector?" They're kind of like, he got taken by a tornado thing." And Jason, that's when he says venti, and Annabeth's like, "You mean Amoi Thueli?" And she's like, "That's the Greek term." So, kind of notable there, the Greek versus Latin thing. Um, they start telling them what happened. And let's see, about halfway through the story, the other guy from the chariot came over. He stood there glaring at them, his arms crossed. He had a tattoo of a rainbow on his biceps, which seemed a little unusual. I don't know who this is yet. So I will say that. I was thinking the whole time of like, who's balls with a tattoo that we've seen? And
Well,
nothing's coming to me quite yet.
it's more like, who do you think his parent would be with that sort of
I
tattoo? Hmm.
okay. So new
That's one of
kid.
that's one of the new cabins that's at camp now is Iris. And so I do like pushing against stereotypes that a child of Iris is named Butch and is big and strong and has muscles. I appreciate not falling into stereotypes like that. That a big, strong, tough man can have a tattoo of a rainbow. And like, I dare
Hmm.
you to tell him that that's girly. You might die. He's not in these books very much, but it's just the idea of like somebody like that. Like, are you sure? Leo figures that out very soon. But yeah, that's what a great first impression for Annabeth. And every single time they mention that she has blonde hair, which doesn't happen very often, I am like, where am I? Like,
Yeah.
I am so used to her being Leah in my mind that when when they that's part of the stupidity of those of the people that are just racist and just also annoying is that they
Hmm.
barely ever even like describe what these characters look like. Like they're like in this scene, Jason is describing her so that we as the audience know who it is because he has
Yeah.
no idea who anybody is. But outside of scenes like that, they hardly ever describe Percy as having like black hair or her having blonde hair. It honestly doesn't matter at all. You wouldn't know that if you were just like reading the books. But either way, this part when they said that she has blonde hair, I was like, where I'm having to like re-get used to this again. That's so weird. I don't think about her like that at all anymore.
And Butch eventually has to explain that to them. She's looking for her boyfriend. He's been missing for 3 days. Some dude named Percy Jackson.
Yeah. And well, Butch tells her like he only has on one shoe. So
Yes.
it has to be so he has to be the person, but and she's the thing I that the point that I like to make about these books about why I like them is that they have such a weird perception of the people that we love is that
Hmm.
they don't like Annabeth. They don't want to go with her. They're like,
Yeah. He's like,
ugh,
I'm not going anywhere with that crazy girl.
I'm not going with her. She's mean and she's yelling at us and like angry at us for existing. Why would I go anywhere with her? And Butch is having to tell them like give her some slack. She thought that her boyfriend would be here and he's not. And they're like, "Well, who the frick is that?" And that's when he says like Percy Jackson. And so right away from the beginning, Annabeth is yelling at them because they're
Hmm.
not Percy. And so why would they ever have a good idea of who Percy is? Like that's the first way that they ever meet him or even meet her. They warm up to her more, but still, it's just that's such a weird way to get to know them,
Yeah.
and that they don't care. They don't know who these people are, and they don't care about Annabeth in that sort of way. They don't, and it's just one of those funny things that Annabeth is usually the one that takes people in and helps them when they first get to camp and would be very like the nice person to go to with like questions and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
and for them, they're like, she's scary. She yells at us. I don't want to talk to her. Was the part in The Lightning Thief that was the worst, like mentally for Percy, which is why I like purposely acted like that book didn't exist and we just started reading the second one when we started doing
Hmm.
this, is because the worst part is when after everything happens at the Met and everybody gaslights him to oblivion.
Yeah.
And he has to like go back and to like normal life for a while. Like like granted he gets kicked out of school and he has to go home, but he's like around Grover who he knows is lying to him. He is around his mom that's acting different. He just like has to try to go back to normal life after this weird thing just happened and like the whole school saw him attack this girl and his like teacher attacked him and everybody
Hmm.
saying it's not true. But in this version of the world, because of this is one of those things that's weird about like when you think about how these characters think of Percy, they don't know that what it used to be like, and say so they
Mhm.
don't realize that they're getting a much better experience because of Percy. And so
Yeah, good
and
point.
because the last Olympian like happened, like they said he's been missing for 3 days, so this is right after, like 4 months after. It's like a right around like Christmas time at this point in the story. Because he disappears like a little bit before Christmas. I do remember that. And just to like have a timeline in my head of where this book starts at least is that like he's the one that helped the gods, fix stuff. And so they're showing up to help them. Like, granted, they're showing up because they thought that they were going to be him. And it
Mhm.
ended up being a longer time of them figuring out where Percy is. Jason is the one that helps them realize it, obviously, because of who Jason is. But it's not as easy as like Percy's at the Grand Canyon, and that's it. They goodbye the end. Um, but it is like a thing that they get picked up and they just leave. They don't have to
Mhm.
go back to their horrendous wilderness school. Them and Hedge just leave and they just are able to go to camp, and they're rescued by demigods like them instead of having to like try to figure out life and then getting attacked by the Minotaur. Um,
Yeah.
Trying to figure out their own way to camp. Instead, demigods are showing up with like Pegasus and stuff that they can like get in the back of and just like sit there while they take them to camp safely. They're not like running around trying to figure that out on their own. Like, these kids are still going to go on a quest, obviously, so they're going to do some of that stuff. But one of the
Mhm.
rules that Percy made was that they can't do quests until they're older. And all these kids are older, but still, like, this is a much easier way for them to be introduced into the magical world. Like, this is much better. None of their mothers died in
Yeah.
front of them, like, seemingly. They weren't told about it in the most horrible way with, like, your best friend that you think is lying to you suddenly reveals who he really is after all this time. Like, the person that revealed themselves was the villain, so they didn't like that kid already. Instead of it being
Mhm.
somebody that they trusted, it was somebody that they don't like, so that's easier. And they get taken to camp by other people that are going to keep them safe the whole time they're there instead of having to figure it out on their own. Nobody
Mhm.
traumatically dies when
Yes.
they think that they're dead or anything like that when they're about to go. They don't know who these people are, and they don't know what demigods are, but they're still being just like taken to another camp. They're already at a camp, so they're just like whatever. Um, but it's a much better, like, healthier sort of way for them to go and to be introduced into this world. And it keeps going, like, in the next book, you see like how they claim kids now. Um,
Mhm.
it's just every aspect of it is better. And one of the things that does come up in the next chapters that we'll read for next week is just the idea that when you're a kid that was there when before these things changed, and
Mhm.
you remember what it was like, that stuff was only a couple months ago. And so people have like mixed feelings about that, about like kids like them that didn't have to go through what they did. Like, Leo and Piper didn't have to fight in a war and see
Mhm.
people that they care about die right in front of them, or think that they were gonna die and be fighting like some of their friends. And they didn't have to deal with somebody like Luke betraying them like that, and everything that happened. They didn't do any of that. They didn't have
Yeah.
to take part of any of it. They're just showing up afterwards when all of that is done, and they're showing up at camp and in a much safer way, and they're going to find out which parent they have way faster than we ever could have imagined before the last Olympian was over. And it's just that's some of the stuff that I like of how Rick writes this book, that when you're the audience, you know the difference. These characters
Mhm.
don't. And so they don't understand why people are giving them attitude sometimes, why people don't like them, why people just say like or just like look at them weird or whatever in the next few
Mhm.
chapters and stuff at camp because they don't know what it used to be like. And it's one of those things
Yeah.
like you're glad that kids like that don't know that it's better for them now, but it is like hard when you're the reader of this book and you know why these things are better for them and they don't like understand because now that we're not in Percy's head all the time, we have to like wonder what he's thinking. And Walker Scobell's brought this up before that in a lot of scenes, when you reread the books, you realize that Percy doesn't actually talk that much, that a lot of
Mhm.
his like funny lines and stuff are in his head. He doesn't actually
Yes.
say those things out loud. And so
Mhm.
he's actually a more introverted person than you would think because most of the things that people think where he's being really funny is just the things that he's thinking to himself, not the things that he
Yeah.
actually says to people. And so that's still true about him. And so in this series, you're because you're on the outside of him, you're having to like wonder what he's thinking when these certain scenes happen because you honestly don't know. And that's so weird. That's always so
Yeah.
weird, right? When they first start happening, when when they do happen in later, much later on, you just are sitting there like, this is so odd that these confrontational scenes with him are happening and I don't know what he's thinking. Of a clue, Leo is more the one in these books that does like the stereotypical, like kind of Percy-ish sense of humor, but he says
Yeah.
everything out loud. Instead of it being in Percy's head, he just says what he's thinking most of the time out loud, at least when it comes to humor stuff. And so it's just, like I said, slightly different. Um, I always like that
Mhm.
they make hyper indigenous. Um, I think that it's really that'll be a whole conversation once they officially say who her mom is.
Yeah.
Because her perception of femininity would be very different because she's indigenous.
Our mythology kind of the day to talk about the one-shoed man thing. This
Mhm.
is borrowing from the original Jason. And the original Jason, we've talked about in a couple different stories. Medea's ex-husband is kind of the most notable way to think of him, but also the original fleece quest guy. I wanted to do a really quick background on where that one-shoed guy came from, because that's the only story about him that ever stuck out in my head, other than he's Medea's ex-husband. And it's because the one-shoed thing is so, like unique. It's hard to get that out of your head. Um, so he is the grandchild of the queen and king of this place called Iolcus in Thessaly. So his grandparents are Queen Tyro and King Chrestheus. They had three mortal children: Ison, Pheres, Amethyron. Those don't really matter except for Ison, who then goes on to have Jason. But Queen Tyro also had this crush on a river god named Enipius. And she pursued him, but she doesn't get him. She gets Poseidon disguised as him, and then has twin sons, Peleus and Neleus. Um, and they're not spelled to where you think they would rhyme, they just happen to rhyme. Peleus is Peleus and Neleus are raised separately from their mortal half brothers. They get exposed on a mountain but then raised by a maid. The same trope that happens over and over again in these myths for some reason. We don't want these babies, we'll get rid of them by leaving them out in a mountain. Never works. Never works. Somebody always takes pity on the baby and feeds them and raises them as their own. So they get raised by a maid, and they eventually find out who their parents are, and they go back to their homeland to save their mom from her evil stepmom. I couldn't find more info on the evil stepmom part of it. It's just they went back to kill her stepmom. That's all we know about that. Eventually, the twins also kill their half brothers except for Ison. And Ison is the rightful heir of the land. So Neleus gets banished at one point. It's just Peleus and Ison. He tells Ison, I'm going to kill all of your descendants. Ison is locked up but not dead somehow. And I also couldn't find a good explanation on this. Like, what's the point in keeping him alive if you don't want any of his descendants who feel like they would have a rightful claim to the throne to come? Like, why not just kill him? But no, he is somehow able to have children while being in this imprisonment. And so they cleverly hide baby Jason away by pretending he's a stillborn. And so like I think the hand servants that are there at the birth are like crying and pretending like, oh yeah, the baby's dead. And they whisk baby Jason off to get raised by Chiron. So Peleus, that son of Poseidon, takes over the kingdom, is ruling there, and he does at one point consult an oracle because he's concerned that somehow he'll get usurped. And the oracle just tells him, beware of the one-man shoe, or the one-shoed man. Beware, this guy's gonna come in with one sandal. And so he has that in the back of his mind. Eventually, he throws some festival. And in this festival walks this dude who only has one sandal on and has this crazy story of how on his way there, he had to save an old lady from a stream and he lost a shoe doing it. The old lady was Hera. And now Hera actually no familial ties to Jason in that way. The reason that she's helping this hero out is because she hates Peleus. So when Peleus was taking over from the old king and queen, when he killed that evil stepmom, the evil stepmom hid in a temple of Hera, and he still killed her anyway. So that's why Hera's like, you know what? Screw this dude. I'm just gonna raise up your rival. And so that's the story of the one man shoot thing. Peleus eventually sends Jason on what he considers an impossible mission of go fetch the golden fleece for me. And that's how that story devolves. But they stole the one shoot thing from the other Jason, also being helped out by Hera, it seems. So it's just an interesting little connection there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Rick is
I think
so.
what's interesting too is like because I was already aware that Hera is a big factor in these books from the fandom stuff, like even before we read it, is Rick Riordan's choice to have her not mother any demigod children, which like it does feel on brand, especially as a goddess of marriage. But I almost part of me wishes that he would have went a little unconventional and like we went to marriage therapy and decided, you know what? Maybe things need to be open on both sides. That's a conversation you don't necessarily want to have with kids, sure, but we still have these guys cheating on their wives. So I feel like there could have been room for some Hera kids.
Yeah. You never know if Hera kids will show up in a later book.
Yeah.
Um, there was somebody in the latest book that people were surprised had. It was like somebody who's not supposed to have kids, and
Hmm.
people were surprised that they had kids. I don't know who that is, and what that means because we're not going to read that book for like 10 years. Um, but either way, that he's so funny. I can't like tell you why that story made me laugh, and because I just like Rick Riordan's so funny with how he puts in. If you know anything about the myths, there's just he makes a lot of connections with things that if you know what they are, it's so funny to me how when I look them up, it just certain things that I think didn't really matter. Suddenly
Hmm.
it's like, oh, that's what he was doing. You're so funny. That's why when I read these books for the first time, I didn't look them up. Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't like spoil myself, but now I can. Now it's more fun.
Yeah. I kind of like I've said this before, knowing the mythology, it's like sometimes it does help you guess what he's going to be doing plot wise, and sometimes it actually throws me off, and I'll be like guessing, but I'll guess wrong. So far, very interesting. Excited to learn more about these kids. Very intrigued by the whole like everybody also had memories implanted, so it's not just something that happened to Jason. Um, that's definitely also kind of an element of intrigue for me of like someone's going through a lot of trouble to set up this scene.
Hmm. And like, why? Why?
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So yeah, for next time we're going to be reading Piper's perspective. Me and William are going to do some work on this, and I'll have him back on not next episode, but the episode after that. So that's where we're
Okay.
at, and we will have the form in the description of the YouTube video for, like coming up with a potential character for the campaign.